Welcome to the Married People Podcast, where we help you make marriage real, fun, and simple. Each week, we have honest conversations about one simple thing that can make your marriage better. Because when your marriage is better, everything's better. My name is Ted Lowe, one of the hosts of the Married People Podcast. I've been working with married couples since 2001, and I've been married since 1995. And we do believe on the Married People Podcast that having a great marriage may be a lot easier to understand than we think. But we're doing things a little bit differently for this episode. I'm sad to say that my co-hosts CJ and Afton aren't here today because they're off on assignment. That's what we'll call it. But they'll be back really, really soon. Today on the Married People Podcast, we're going to take a look at the question, how do I have an intentional marriage in the midst of a busy career? I think a question that's really relevant to a lot of us. To help us think about the answer to that question, I got a chance to sit down with my good friend, Jeff Henderson. Now, I've known Jeff for years, and while he has always blown me away with his creativity and purpose at work, I'm even more impressed with how intentional he is at home. To tell you a little bit more about Jeff, Jeff is the lead pastor of Gwinnett Church. Prior to that, he was the lead pastor of Buckhead Church. He also spent 21 years in marketing, working mostly for Chick-fil-A. Jeff and his wife, Wendy, have 2 children, and they live in the Atlanta area. I'm so excited for you to hear my interview with Jeff Henderson. Hey everybody, I'm here with Jeff Henderson. Jeff Henderson is the lead pastor of Gwinnett Church, one of the multi-campus locations of North Point Ministries. Prior to Gwinnett Church, for 7 years, Jeff served as the lead pastor of Buckhead Church, which was North Point's first multi-site location. He spent 21 years in marketing, working most recently for Chick-fil-A before beginning his roles with North Point Ministries. Jeff and his wife, Wendy, live in Atlanta with their 2 kids. Hi, Jeff.
And I'm a friend to Ted and Nancy Lowe, which is probably the most important thing there.
Well, Jeff has always been a great encouragement to Nancy and I, and it's been so great watching you and Wendy and what God has done through the both of you. We've always enjoyed Wendy. Nancy, when you guys were at Buckhead Church, Nancy would always gravitate towards Wendy, and they would always have some fun conversations. So,
well, Wendy and Nancy are the fun people in our marriages, right?
Yes, it's true. We need them desperately.
Mine. Wendy's the fun one in our marriage.
Well, Jeff, one of the things we're trying to do on this podcast is highlight marriages that we think that are winning. And, watching you and Wendy over the last, 15 years, working close with North Point and working at North Point, the thing I've loved about your marriage and watching the 2 of you is you're a very busy guy and you're a dreamer and you have done so many things and you continue to have, so many plates spinning, but yet you and Wendy seem to make that work. And so what we want to do on this podcast is highlight couples like that. But before we dive into the solution part of this, if somebody's listening and they're a busy leader or they're a busy mom, a busy dad, they've got a lot of things going on, why do you think that brings such challenge to a marriage?
Well, I think it's the schedule. It's the calendar. Oh, you're out of town this week? I didn't know that. So, and I would say probably our most frequent tension points in our marriage has been me not informing Wendy, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm going out of town next week or something like that. So we learned early on, and it's still a work in progress because we're all works in progress, but we've learned to get ahead of the schedule and calendar. And there's some things, so really, really practical. This is so simple. It's even embarrassing to admit, Ted, but we have each other's calendars. And so Wendy can look on my calendar and there. And so she's the very detailed person and I'm not. And I'm kind of the wow and she's the how. And you need those,
Right.
There are wow people and how people, and what happens to them? They get married.
Right. And tell us the difference between how and wow people.
Well, how makes things, how people, you need how people because they get things done. Right. Wow people go, hey, what if we do this, And so our mutual friend, John Woodall, he is a how. And his wife, Debbie, is a wow. And so John has told Wendy, hey, just let them dream, Wendy, because they're not going to do half these things they're dreaming about anyway. So, but Wendy will, she's so great. And she's learned with this, and we've learned together. But when I'm dreaming, what if we do this? What if we do that? Typically she could jump in and go, how are you going to do that? So she'll go, oh, wow, that's interesting. And let it dream and dream and then go. And if I keep saying it like after 24 hours, then she'll go, oh, this may be sticking. And then she'll begin, oh, that's great. Encourage. Now, how are we going to do this? And I don't know. And then she'll say, well, what if we did this, this, and this? So that we've learned how to leverage the strengths of one another. And, those are opposites. And when you're dating, they're attractive. And when you're married, they become tension points. And so we've had to learn how to leverage those strengths. And so as a Hal person, she could tell you, and Wendy's got a phenomenal memory. And I don't, okay?
I understand
so
this.
she can look at a snapshot of a calendar for a month and go, so you're going to be here on Thursday or whatever. And, oh, yeah, that's right. Where am I going again? And so we've just had to learn those tension points because I actually think busyness gets a bad rap in the sense of that it's evil in and of itself. I don't think it's evil in and of itself because there's work to be done. There are ball games to go to. There's soccer matches to go. There's kids to all this. That's great. But how you manage the busyness together, that's the key.
And so before you guys figured this out, so you're saying the tension for you was, hey, I'm going to go a million miles an hour. I'm going to do these things. And she's kind of caught off guard going, I didn't see this coming. So how did you guys move? How did you make the shift? Where did you learn what you learned? Was it from John Woodall, from around? Because I think a lot of people, Jeff, you and I have been so blessed to be surrounded by so many great leaders who told us, that ministry is important and dreaming big things for God's important, but their family is more important. Right. And I don't think a lot of people, have that around them. How did you guys shift from, hey, we're struggling with this thing to, hey, this is working?
Wendy and I have an unfair advantage in the fact that we have her parents and my parents. And before my dad passed away, my parents were married 62 years. Wow. They got married when they were 17. Wow. And they got married, went on honeymoon, and Dad came back and went to the Philippines for World War II. So in fact, yesterday they would have been married 72 years. Oh, wow. So yesterday was their wedding anniversary when we're recording this. And then Wendy's parents have been married for a long, long time. So her dad was in commercial real estate, developer, very successful. My dad was a pastor, very, very busy. But we saw some non-negotiables in their marriage in the sense that the business was not going to trump. Wendy's dad's business was not going to trump going to ball games and being there. He went to every ball game. My dad never selected his church over his family. He was at all the games. And that's not to say he had every game, but I knew my dad would choose me over the business. Our mutual friend, Andy Stanley, says choose to cheat. So they really understood that we're going to choose to cheat on the business so that we can focus on the family. So we got that as a fantastic example. Wow. So for Wendy and me, we went into the marriage going, hey, there's some common things we're agreeing with on. First, our marriage is based on a belief in Jesus and who he is and who he wants us to be. And we're going to have that's the centering thing of our lives. Then now that we have kids, they're also, our family will trump, more often than not, decisions. That's not to say that there aren't times in work that you have to, hey, I'm going to have to go. There are some sacrifices, but those should be the usual exceptions rather than the rule. And we're going to choose our family and we're going to choose our marriage. So having that common goal and foundation, when you have that as your foundation, then when you bump up against, I didn't tell you about Thursday or the foundation, those are things we've worked out. It just took a while. But the foundation that we never had to work out was we believe in Jesus, we love Jesus, and we know Jesus loves us, and we love our kids, and I'm just not going to choose a church or business over them. I'm going to leverage this time that I have. As I told you, we just dropped off my daughter to college. And if you got kids young, but I'm telling you, it goes fast. I'm so grateful that I don't have to look back at regret on that I can look back on just joy, and I miss those days already. So I think there was a foundation that Wendy and I had in Jesus and knowing that, hey, we believe in our marriage, we believe in our kids. Let's just work out the details and we can figure that out.
Wow, what's so remarkable about you guys both coming into marriage, when you think about both your parents' generation, like that wasn't a common thing to say, hey, dads especially, I'm going to put my kids before work. I mean, that's this whole, even the idea and concept of parenting is relatively new. It's basically, we have kids to be farmhands, basically. And so for your parents to be so ahead of the game of that, because I've asked you, I think it was probably 10 or 12 years ago, just as I've sought to get through my own junk of what I grew up with. I was like, Jeff, how did you turn out like you? How did you, because you're so kind and so generous and such a great leader. And so I was trying to lean into that and like teach him. And I remember you saying, Ted, I just had these great parents. They just taught me great things. I'm like, oh, then I'm okay. I do. But
but there's a flip side of that. I often think I'm going to get to heaven someday, and God's going to say, "That's all you did with those great parents I gave you." So I feel a stewardship responsibility. But like I said, I feel we have an unfair advantage in terms of the parents we had.
Right. Well, and I think the great thing about that, Jeff, is for those of us who parents weren't as involved, who didn't model that. That doesn't have to be the thing that stops us from doing that, right?
No. In fact, if you've ever had a bad boss in life, you actually ironically learn more from the bad boss of what not to do and what you should do than really the good boss. And so, in fact, I'll be honest with you, I had a bad boss years ago, and I remember praying, God, can I leave this job? And I felt like the Lord, the Lord's never spoken audibly to me, but I felt like, well, you're going to learn a lot here. And I did. In fact, there are decisions I make to this day, Ted, where I just make the opposite of what I think. So for those of you listening that didn't have a great dad, that does not declare your future. Let me just say that. You can actually change the generational tree, which is a fantastic thing to do that can come from the power of God and who God is in your life. So that whatever that relationship is, that's not defining your future. Sure. It may define and mark some of your past, but it certainly doesn't have to define. You can change the generational tree, which is what I love, what you're doing and what you and Nancy are standing for and doing. And so it's just really, really important.
Right. And we can change that.
Absolutely.
And I've watched our generation, Jeff, I think, make those decisions. And I've just always been so thankful of the leaders that God has put around Nancy and I. We started off ministry surrounded with Doug and Kathy Fields.
Yeah.
And their marriage. And then, working with Rick Warren, who always was saying, ministry here at Saddleback is important, but you've got to put your family first. Then we go to North Point, and Andy unpacks this whole concept of choose to cheat. Can you kind of unpack that just a little bit?
Well, it was awesome. Andy, if you haven't read the book Choose to Cheat, it's a real short read, but it's a very powerful read. And he tells, in the story where he tells the Lord, hey, I want to do what you've asked me to do, but can you help me grow this church in about 45 hours a week? And you look back 21 years later, I think God honored that.
He did okay.
I think he honored that request. Now, the thing that Andy does unpack, which I think is important, is there are principles to play. There's a stewardship responsibility with your family and your marriage. There's a stewardship responsibility to your work as well. So it's not being negligent to your work.
Sure.
It's approaching work in a very smart way, in a very efficient way, in a very effective way. And I think there's tools and systems and processes to do all of that. I remember asking Truett Cathy one time, the founder of Chick-fil-A, I said, so you've been fairly successful. You created a multi-billion-dollar organization, and yet as I look at your kids, your marriage, your grandkids, they're phenomenal people. How did you do that? And he said, well, I didn't choose. I didn't say, I can have a multi-billion-dollar business, but I can't have a great marriage or family. Or I can have a great marriage and family, but I can't have a multi-billion-dollar business. He says, you can do both.
Wow.
You can do both. And I'll never forget him saying that. We were driving in a car with cow spots on it, driving down 85. I was driving into some speaking engagement. I don't even know where this was. And I'll never forget him saying, Jeff, you can do both. You can do both. Now, that's easier said than done. But I think as we talked about, we need to get ahead of our schedule and all that. There's some tools. And Andy talks about playing to your strengths. Do only what you can do. All of those leadership principles are in play here. But you can do both. And to your point, you were around Doug and Rick Warren, and we've both been around Andy, and we've seen people that have, you can do both. It's not easy, but no one said it was going to be easy.
Right. Well, I think, how many times do people leave a job that they've poured into? They leave that job, they move the next thing, and they don't hear anything from those people after they've moved. And it's not that they're bad people. It's just, work moves on. And I heard someone say, it might have been Andy, long after, we're irrelevant at work, we're going to be relevant at home. And so I think it's just this idea of pull back a little bit and say, man, at the end of the day, these people in my home are the most important people. And they're even bigger than ministry, and they're bigger than leadership. But I love what you're saying is, people are listening going, hey, you guys live in fantasy church world where you've got a leader saying, choose to cheat.
Right.
What would you say to those leaders who say, or those moms and those dads who say, that's really great for your world. In my world, I've got this hard driving boss who wouldn't want me to choose to cheat, who gets frustrated if I leave early to go to a baseball game. What do you say to those leaders and to those husbands and wives?
Well, I would tell them to lead up as well as you possibly can and have those conversations and then ask them to trust the results. I in today's technology world, it doesn't bother me if someone's not sitting in their cubicle or because I can look at their results. If they're not getting the results we want, then okay, well, let's talk about that. But if you're getting fantastic results and you're at the ball game, that's a win for me. Right. So I would lead up and say, what are your results like? And if you're generating great, fantastic results, I typically my experience has been the boss is like, oh, keep doing that, whatever it is. Now, if you have a boss where like, nope, you've got to be here and I want you to work 65 hours a week and you've got to miss ball games, I think you have to ask the question, Lord, do you want me here? Mm-hmm. And you may need to leave. I mean, that may be the ultimate thing, but I would try to lead up and do that as well as you possibly can. If you lead up, you pray, and you're still in this environment and it's affecting your family long term, I would leave and find another job. I'll say this, though. There are going to be seasons where you're going to work 65 hours a week or 60 hours a week. There's those seasons. But as you back up, there needs to be a consistent. You don't need to do that all the time.
Right. And I think that's important. Right now in our world, it's a season. Fall's a tough season for us. We have this thing called Orange Tour. This is where we're talking now, is on Orange Tour. There's a lot of cities. There's a lot of stops. But we've talked it through, and we know that there's going to be a tough few months. What do you say? How do you make those tough months? I think there's the perspective of going, hey, it's not going to last forever. What do you do during those times that you still can keep contact with Wendy and the kids during those busy times if you're traveling a ton?
Well, I'm in the same boat this year, so I'll be on a lot of Orange Tour stops with you. And so back up to earlier this year when Reggie and the team said, hey, would you go on some of the tour stops? Well, I didn't inform Wendy, hey, so I want to let you know I'm going on Orange Tour stops. Right. I sat down and said, okay, so Reggie called me and wants me to go speak on Orange Tour. Let's look at the stops. And first of all, what do you think about our schedule? And then secondly, let's select some cities together that you think would work on our schedule if you think this is a good opportunity. So we love Reggie and Orange and you guys. So she said, yeah, absolutely. Let's. So we sat down, we selected 7 cities, put it on our calendar. So we really don't have much discussion now because she's looking at the calendar going, okay, so you're going to be in Irvine in a couple of weeks. You're going to be in Boston. Actually, when I'm in Boston, it's actually family weekend at Samford University where my daughter is. So I got to fly from Boston, Birmingham. She'll pick me up at Birmingham. So all of this is planned ahead of time, very busy. But we agreed on this together. And so since we agreed on this together, we're journeying this together versus me going, hey, book this trip and I'm going to go be gone, 7 dates in the fall. Wait, what? I thought we were a partnership. So this was a mutual decision that we made. And Wendy never does this, but if she were to say, no, I don't want you to do any of that, I would go, okay, great. And we're not going to do that. Now, there have been some opportunities where we mutually decided, yeah, we're not going to do that. But it's a mutual decision. We're in this together versus me informing. And I think particularly for men, if we try to power up and go, you know what, this is my livelihood and I've got to travel and I got to learn. Yeah, maybe, but you're not in partnership. You've become more of a CEO type. And so I just feel like these decisions are mutual. And when they're mutual, you go into them mutually as well.
Because when you don't, I think the opposite of that is if you do power through, you're just begging for resentment at that point.
Oh, yeah.
We're just begging for it. So I think that's great. Let's get on the front end. Let's talk about this together. Let's make decisions together. So when this is happening, it wasn't something happening to her. This is something she decided.
Well, for example, with the Boston example, so I'm flying into Birmingham. Well, she's got to pick me up at 11:30 at night. Okay, so if I had just said...
there could be some resentment at 11.
Right. Well, this is something we looked at and decided, and here we are. And so all that's been great. But we've learned to do this. We've had to learn to get ahead of the calendar. And again, that's not naturally my wiring to get ahead on a calendar. But I've learned how to do that with her.
Right. No, that's very powerful and super practical. Absolutely. One of the things that we've decided when we were traveling, when I started traveling by myself, is I decided to take a kid with me. I'll say, hey, I'll fly in, but I need 2 tickets because this is how this is going to work for our family. And so we've actually had some of the most incredible trips that I've gotten with my kids. I've never had one church or event tell me, hey, no, you value family, then we're not going to do this ticket.
Right.
And we were, my daughter and I were, Teddy, we're just in Wyoming, and I got through speaking. We weren't flying out the next day, and so I asked the pastor. I said, "Hey, we're in town for the rest of the day. What should we do?" And he goes, "I drive to Mount Rushmore. It's just 3 hours away." So we drove to Mount Rushmore. It was more like 4 hours and 15 minutes. Each way.
Counting?
Yeah, it was. I'm still not completely recovered from seeing those presidents' heads in rocks, but let me tell you, it was one of those memories I know we'll never forget. So I think it's this thing of how, it's not that you stop what you're doing, what you're dreaming about, what you believe God's put on your heart, what you feel like you're really good at. It's not about that. It's about how do we make this work for our family, and our family has to know that they come first. One of the most practical things that I've heard, it's how we make our spouse and our kids feel like that they come first is, again, a Doug Fields thing was don't be on the phone in the car with your kids or with your spouse. Mm-hmm. And it's been so funny. So I've tried to be the evangelist for that because I just thought it was such a great idea. And you wouldn't believe how many people come back and say, wow, that made all the difference. Mm-hmm. It's just those little things that's saying, hey, you come first. Like, I'm not going. It's so funny. My kids will see the phone ring and they'll go, Dad, just answer it. I know you don't, but I don't care. Yeah. And I know they probably don't care right now. They're teenagers. They don't care if I'm talking to them or not. But hopefully one day that will matter to them, that they absolutely come first.
Absolutely. Those are memories that they will. And one of the things I tell dads is that I think it's helpful every 90 days to look at your wallpaper, and if you on your phone, and if you haven't taken a new screenshot of we went to Mount Rushmore, like if your Mount Rushmore wallpaper was still there 3 years ago and you haven't created an etched memory. So for me, as I'm looking, I have a picture on my phone right now of when we toured Pixar. That was 6 weeks ago. A long story short, we got to tour Pixar. So we're in front of the big Lusco lamp outside of the Pixar headquarters. So that was 6 weeks ago. Well, if that wallpaper is still on my phone in 6 months from now and I haven't created a new etched memory with our kids, that's just when I go to my phone and I see that wallpaper, I go, I haven't done anything in 6 months. So I try to have a new wallpaper on my phone to look at it that reminds me every 90 days I need to have an etched memory. That doesn't mean you have to go to Mount Rushmore, Disney World, Pixar. Right. It could be you're having ice cream somewhere.
Totally.
But it's just how are you creating these etched memories? And we always look at our phone and we all see the wallpaper. So for me, the wallpaper is a reminder, what am I doing for us as a family every 90 days? That's
great. I know a couple of years ago, Nancy made the comment. She says, we never print out any of these pictures that we take. We had all, for years after years, she's very, very organized like Wendy. So she would have the photo album like labeled, here's this year. And so for Christmas a couple of years ago, I printed out kind of our year, which took me forever. And it was a little bit of a hot mess because I'm me and ADD and I've got 5,000 pictures all over the office. A little bit of a train wreck. I learned past that to do better. But we would flip through the year in these, photo albums because she's also very good with money. She doesn't want me to spend money. So I have to get crafty with my gifts. But what that did for me, Jeff, it made me think, what's that photo album going to look like at the end of the year? Is it going to be things where we were intentional and we had fun and we did things? Or is it going to be like, wow, we were really busy and our kids were getting older and it was just easier to let them do their own thing? And so, I think that's so important to go, what are those etched memories?
And can I say something about
please.
That? I think that's a scorecard. And, I think for those of us in the business world, church world, whatever, we love scorecards, which is, it's healthy to understand how things are going. What is attendance like, giving like, what's the business doing? The problem in parenting and marriage, what's the scorecard? You go home and Andy's talked about this. How do you know what you're doing? Well, I think for you knew that at the end of the year, there was a scorecard coming. And that is, if you did this and you had 3 photos to pull from, probably not a great year. So I think that scorecard is it's kind of a competitive thing. And I think that's great. And so I love what you did there because it's a scorecard and it's kind of challenged you as a dad. And and it challenged that leader in you to, I got to have a scorecard of photos to put this, this memory together. So that's a scorecard, what you did.
Wow. And I think, especially for us guys, like we do like that scorecard. We do like that. And I think that's why, relationships, are so ambiguous. Like, am I winning? You know, if you're winning at work, I mean, that's, there's all the telltales at home. You're going, am I winning? So I think that's a great tool for a guy to think about. Okay, what is my scorecard? What does I want it to look like at the end of the year? And I think this segue is really good. Is Jeff, you just started a thing called championtribes.com, helping busy dads bless their sons. Now, I know this is a married people podcast, but I think it's so all intertwined. It all matters. It's I'm sure it matters to Wendy in your relationship, how you treat your son. Can you tell us a little bit about championtribes.com and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, very briefly. But the problem we're trying to solve, Ted, is if let's just take dads. This is true for sons. This is true for daughters as well. But let's just take sons. If a son grows up and he never receives his father's blessing and affirmation, he'll grow up and often go looking for it in potentially all the wrong places. So what happens is I think we have a generation of men that are living for their father's affirmation instead of living from their father's affirmation.
Say that one more time.
They've grown up trying to live for their father's affirmation. Do you believe in me? Do you feel like I'm doing a good job? Do you approve of me? Instead of living from their father's affirmation. My dad believes in me. My dad believes I have a daring destination. So for me, my dad would constantly tell me, I believe in you. I mean, Wendy would laugh because every sermon I preached was the greatest sermon ever. There's Sermon on the Mount, son, and then right here was, so Wendy would laugh and kind of roll her eyes. But that was my dad. So I lived from my dad's affirmation. So I go into the world thinking my dad believes in me. So, honestly, these last 3 years without him have been a struggle because that voice has been removed from me. So I've, really trying to figure out how do I live without that voice now? Well, I've been blessed to have that voice for a long time. So, but there are a lot of guys that didn't have that. And so now they have kids themselves. And now they're going, how do I do this? And so I think we have a generation of men that did not receive their father's affirmation. So long story short, my friend David Salyers, mutual friend of ours, he called me a few years ago and said, hey, I went to a friend's bar mitzvah. And it was the most powerful, emotional, moving thing I've ever seen. And the son reads this letter about what he's learned in this journey. And this dad reads this letter about, I believe in you. This community rises up and says, you're a man now. You're not a boy anymore. You're a man now. And he goes, I walked away and I thought, I've not thought once about doing this for my own son. And he said, so I'm doing it. So Nick was 12 at the time, and he said, so I have 5 other dads and 5 other 12-year-olds, and we're going on a year-long journey. And we're having different speakers come into our basement and just speak to the boys. Would you be one of the speakers? So went over there, saw this, and I thought, this is phenomenal. And this isn't a new idea, but it's a mainly forgotten one in the Western culture about a tribe of men.
Absolutely.
Saying, okay, now you're an adult and we believe in you and we bless you and now you're a man and we're going to teach you what it means to be a man. So I pulled David aside and said, hey, when my son Cole gets to be 12, can we go through this with your son Daniel? And we did it. This is 2 years ago. Went through a year-long journey, learned about confidence, humility, accountability, how to manage money, all this kind of stuff, how to manage technology, wonderful experiences for 12 months. And at the end, we got our families together and our sons read a letter of what they learned. And then every dad read a letter saying, I believe in you, I affirm you, you got a daring destination, and I'm proud of you. Everybody's crying, everybody's hugging. And so David and I, we just pulled this together that night, and I said, we can't keep this to ourselves. We need to spread this out to the world. But to your point, dads are busy. They don't have time to figure this out, We were busy. So we decided, let's just do it for them. So we've created a digital platform that has all the content with games and movie clips and teachings. All they got to do is just plug on their cell phone, put it on a screen, and they just watch it with their boys. There are gifts that they give the boys. There's a gold medal. There's little swords. They get a ring because a champion wears a ring. And all of the gifts they get coincide with the lesson. But ultimately, it coincides with a final blessing ceremony. And we just believe that we can help improve the world one father and son at a time. So every time a 12-year-old boy has a birthday, and he's 12, our dream is that they would get this gift from their dad, Champion Tribes, and say, hey, for the next year between now and when you turn 13, because you're about to get a teen to your number of your age, when you turn 13, you're going to become a man, and you're going to know what it's like to be a man through this journey. So we've launched it, and we have no idea if it's going to work or not, but we've had a lot of fun doing it. And then final thing, we get the question, well, do you not like moms and daughters? And so there's a mother-daughter version of this in the works as well. So anyway, I feel like it's a stewardship responsibility. I have most of the lessons that I've written, or at least the portions I've written in the content, are lessons my dad taught me. So I'm able to just kind of pass this on to other sons and other dads.
So it's championtribes.com.
Championtribes.com. And they can see all the information there. And again, we love the tribe setting. So we would love for, 4 or 5 dads to get their sons together. And so, because when we went through this, I loved the fact that Cole heard me affirm him, but there were 5 other dads that said, hey, Cole, I know your dad believes in you, but I just want you to know, I believe in you too. That tribe, that community, it's, again, not a new idea. It's just forgotten in our culture.
Right. I think about in the context of marriage, Jeff, I think when we are affirmed by our dads and we do get our worth from him, you said from him, not looking, say that more time.
Right. Well, if you are living knowing that you're living from your dad's affirmation.
From, not for.
Instead of, and you see this in, I was watching this miniseries, Albert Einstein. What happened? Albert Einstein was living for his father's affirmation, and then Albert Einstein's sons were living for his affirmation. Dysfunction, strife, all of this. And but I will say this, Ted, bringing it back to married people, and this is great for the dads. One of the most attractive things, I think, for a wife is when they see their husband pouring into their kids. And so when Cole and I would come back from a Champions Tribe session, Wendy would say, what did y'all do? Tell me what you did. And she was, and all the other dads were like, man, my wife's asking, what do we do? And she's so intrigued by this. This is making me look like a hero. Well, part of that is, wow, you're fulfilling your role as a father to our son. That's very attractive.
Oh, absolutely. When they see us putting our families ahead of work, that is very attractive. And I think part of this, part of what might could come from this is better husbands, because as these guys grow up and they feel this security in who they are because dad helped them feel secure, then they're not trying to stay those 30, 40 extra hours at work because they're not trying to get their worth from a job. They've already gotten their worth. They know whose they are and they know what they are. And that's just, again, when I think about this, stopping this generational curse, for lack of a better word, sin, whatever you want to call it, it's to stop it and to move forward. And I want my kids, I want my boys, and I want my daughter, I want them to be great spouses.
Yeah.
And I think this security that comes from me and comes from Nancy, into their lives is going to secure them in such a way to be great spouses.
Yeah, and we feel like this is a missing milestone in our culture. For example, there are milestones in our lives. You get married, you graduate,
right.
You have a baby. Those are marked by celebrations. Well, when you go from 12 to 13 or you go from, child to adult, there's not like a milestone. And we feel like we want to create this milestone. We want to create a celebratory milestone celebration so that a young man and eventually a young woman can look back and go, wow, I became an adult. I became a man or woman in that, and I know what it's like. And David's son, Nick, he was in the first group, and he went to college. He goes, when I was 13, I thought, well, this is cool. I get to hang out with my dad. This is a lot of fun experiences. Because I didn't really realize what happened until I got to college. When I got to college and I saw people struggling, my friends struggling with things that I wasn't struggling with, I thought, why is that? And he goes, I traced it all the way back to what I learned at Champion Tribes and this foundation I was living from my dad's affirmation. So I don't have to do all this stuff. And he began to make wise decisions based on, and this is Nick saying this, not me. And I thought, wow, so this is really a down payment for the future.
It's a down payment for the future. His future wife doesn't know yet, but she'll be very thankful one day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Basically she's marrying a man and not a boy.
Right.
Right?
And there are way too many man boys out there right now.
There really are. All right, Jeff, thank you so much. I think this is so practical for people. It's so encouraging, and we're all trying to grow up, and we're just thankful that God has put resources and people in our life to help us do that. And so people that are listening, maybe you feel like a boy or you feel like a girl, these are things that, when we put these things into practice, when we choose our family over business, over work, we do start to grow up, and our families and our spouses benefit from that. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ted.
For being here. ask you a couple quick questions. While you're here, I want to do this with everybody that we're highlighting here. Just a couple quick questions. Number one, what's your favorite thing about Wendy?
Never told her this, but her laugh. And really because her laugh is her joy, her personality, and her beauty. And the reason I've never told her this is because I don't want her to become self-conscious while she laughs. So if she's listening to this, I may tell her this before she listens to the podcast, but her laugh is just who she is. It's her joy, it's her beauty, and it's one of the many reasons people are attracted to her.
I love that. And finally, other than you and Wendy, who do you think has the best marriage that you know of and why?
Well, I would say the best marriage I've ever seen is my parents. They went through a lot together in terms of World War II and just ministry and, ups and downs of ministry, but they had a fantastic marriage. And my mom desperately misses my dad. But seeing my mom love my dad after his stroke and 10 months of him passing away, there's nothing more heartbreaking and more beautiful than that. So those two folks.
Wow. And that's the goal for us, right?
Yeah.
It's our kids to look back and say, wow, my parents had a great marriage. It's just, statistically, research shows that, gosh, your marriage is so important. Your kids feeling safe.
Oh, absolutely. Could not agree more than that.
So thank you for modeling it for us. Thank you for being a friend all these years and allowing me to kind of lean into you and ask you questions. And Jeff, what would you do about this situation? What do about this? I think you have poured in to so many men and to so many people and so many families. And just thank you for that, Jeff.
Thanks, Ted. And my only regret, I thought Nancy was going to be here, so I'm sorry she's not here.
I'm with you too. They would have a way better podcast than the two of us.
They need to be doing this, Ted, not you and me. So,
absolutely. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Ted.
So that was my interview with Jeff Henderson. That guy always makes me want to be better at work, but especially be better at home. Thanks for joining us for the Married People Podcast. We hope today's episode helped you realize that marriage is a little easier than you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love to have you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast. Your review helps us to make this podcast better and get these conversations in front of the people who really need to hear them. And finally, for more resources to make your marriage better, check out my book, Your Best Us, on Amazon, and visit our website, marriedpeople.org. Join us for next week's episode. And until next time, I'm Ted Lowe, and thank you for listening.